Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Sales Ops Effect. You're here with me, your host, Charlene Thompson. And today we have our guest, Michael Akinle. Michael, how are you?
I'm good. I'm so happy you pronounced my last name right because I get all kinds of variations of it. I get
What do you think?
Akinle, I get Akinle. It's ridiculous, really. It's not that hard, right?
No, I didn't think it was that difficult, but
Yeah, it's
okay.
Akinle, and just, but everyone seems to want to butcher it up and have their own version. But that's perfectly fine. We listen,
Okay,
we don't
cool.
judge.
I
Um,
have to even check with you beforehand as well. Just
you know
like
what I
that, please.
mean? That's why I'm like, I'm impressed, right? It's cool. That's really cool. Well done.
All right,
Well, to a good
cool.
start.
All right. Well, so Michael here is a software sales leader at the largest private equity backed software company in the UK. So if you
Yes.
want to know what that is, you can click his LinkedIn link in the show notes and go and take a little bit of a nosy,
Yes.
right? And so we're gonna just have a really human conversation about stuff that's going on right now in
Yeah,
terms of the
absolutely.
sales world and tech world. And I'd like to start with hiring
Yeah.
because if you listening to this or watching this are looking for a role or you know anybody looking for a role for whatever reason, seemingly at least in the Western world, hiring seems to be rather difficult right now.
It
Trying to
is.
find a job seems to be rather difficult right now. Um, but it can be for all sorts of reasons. So Michael, I know that you're in a position where you hire people.
Yeah.
What differences have you been seeing now compared to, let's say, before the pandemic in terms of candidates?
Um, I think the difference between pandemic and now, and you validate me here, right? There were a lot more jobs around the pandemic time. A lot more, right? A lot more hiring. Loads of companies were hiring to grow. There was so much growth in the pandemic. Like if you remember, especially in the tech world, companies were getting like massively funded by VCs. Companies were getting acquired. It was growth at all cost, quote unquote, right? So that meant tons of money were going into go-to-market teams or building go-to-market teams. CROs were getting a ton of headcount and they were just going to the market, just trying to fill seats to drive revenue, to drive growth. What's actually changed now is VC money has slowed down. It's not more, it's not, it's, we are no longer in the growth at all cost era. We are now in the efficient growth era. We are in the growth, if it makes sense. In other words, we are not going to hire 30 sales guys anymore. We are going to make sure that our sales, we're going to have this do more with less approach. So we're going to have maybe keep headcount the same, but increase territory, increase quota, which as a result meant that companies were then investing a lot more in like their tech stack, et cetera, and just trying to be more operationally efficient, et cetera, et cetera. So the growth slowed down because there was less money. VCs were pumping less money into the startup ecosystem. There were less kind of big funding rounds that we were seeing, which has obviously meant that companies are keeping their go-to-market teams leaner, more
Mhm.
efficient. That is what's been happening now. As you can see, you're not hearing a ton of IPO stuff going on. The IPO market is quieting down. The VC funding market is quieting down. There's maybe some more M&A stuff that's starting to happen now. You might have seen the recent announcement of Google acquiring Wix for about $32 billion. So we're starting to see, it's insane, right? So each of those founders are now billionaires, right? They've all pocketed about $3 billion,
Mm.
which is amazing for them. But we're going to maybe start to see kind of more M&A activity at the moment. So the approach now for most companies, let's stay lean, let's do more with less. And then that's translated in terms of hiring to actually, we're not going to go hire a big SDR team or big BDR team. We're maybe going to get our sales guys, instead of relying on SDR, BDR, we're going to get them to start maybe doing some more self-source pipe gen. Maybe they will start actually trying to feed, let's get them to start feeding themselves. So what it's meant is AEs have now turned into folks that were just focused on closing deals, and now folks that actually are responsible for generating a certain percentage of pipeline, right? Supported by marketing, maybe supported by much, much leaner SDR through. That is what that is the theme that we are seeing now in the kind of the startup ecosystem.
I'm going to take a little bit of a left turn here and then we're going to come back to the main thing, but my brain won't let me go past it. We know that the people with the money have made more money over this time, but now they're spending less money and want to be more efficient. Do you have any idea, any thoughts as to why and where this is coming from? Because I understand efficiency and I am pro efficiency all the time, but it does beg the question of what made that happen? Like, I know you speak to all different kinds of people, but it's like they already
Yeah.
have a lot of money extra that they weren't expecting to get over
Yeah,
that
well,
time.
companies just ran out of cash or were running out
Yeah.
of cash or didn't
Yeah.
have the runway. They didn't, companies were looking at runway and they were having runway of months rather than years, right?
Yeah.
So what do you do if you want to have more runway? You trim. You trim your go-to-market.
That's how
Because
they think about it.
sales are the most expensive. Sales are very expensive, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
you trim your go-to-market, you trim your SDR team, you maybe trim your sales team a bit, you trim your marketing team. Like, so yeah, sales usually get trimmed because they are very, very expensive folks. Um, so that's why you're seeing what you're seeing. So it's not that the investor expectation is that when we've made more money, so we should pump more money in. It's more, again, we want to be more efficient. We want to do more with less. Can we get to 10 million instead of hiring 20 people to get to 10 million? Can we do it with 10?
Can we be more sustainable just in case another pandemic happens? And
Correct.
that way, if
Exactly.
we actually have
Right.
some weight in our foundation, we'll be more likely to survive it
Yeah.
easier.
Correct. So right now it's the focus is lean efficiency. Let's actually get to profit.
Mm.
Um, with the folks don't want to be raising money every 12 to 18 months
Yeah,
just
it's not.
to it just
Yeah.
gets, it just gets more diluted, right? As you can imagine, which is not good for the founders because the moment, your shares get more diluted, you earn
Everybody's
less
got to
money
say,
at
you've
the end.
got to answer to all these different masters. And
Yeah,
then,
exactly.
even if you did come into business with good human ways of doing things and empathy and all of those things intact, once you have to answer to 100 different people, all of a sudden you can't do the things that you want to do.
Right,
Can't
right.
treat people how you want to treat them because the people with the bag of money says no.
You got it.
That's how things happen a lot. So I get that and I'm pro efficiency. And also, I kind of feel like, this seems to be a really, really sharp knife that's going straight across the top. Because if we're basically just saying squeeze lots of different roles back into the one role without fully looking at it, bearing in mind everything has progressed over time, there's a reason why SDRs, sales development representatives, or baby salespeople, as I used to refer to them, exist, right? If everything's being squeezed, are the requirements, are the training requirements and what's being offered changing in accordance to these new sales roles that are now existing, or are they not changing accordingly? Otherwise, we're just forcing work onto people that they're not necessarily prepared for, and then what happens? Then you're going to
Absolutely.
have turnover.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the biggest problems for go-to-market leaders is trying to get their best closers to now start doing pipe gen, right? Super hard because, and most of the time, they don't have the enablement. It is so much harder now versus 5 years ago to build pipeline. It's so much harder now to get responses from prospects. It's so much harder now to land meetings. It's just everything just so much harder, mixed with the fact that AEs are not enabled to do pipe gen properly, to prospect properly. So what do you get? You get a bit of a disaster, right? You're probably going to get a dip in pipeline. Then maybe you get some finger pointing at marketing. And marketing are getting the noise from sales saying, "Oh, you're not giving us enough
Mm.
leads. Sometimes you're not giving us good enough leads, right? Or the leads you're giving to us are not good enough, and therefore we're not going to work them." And then you start to have this friction between marketing and sales, um, cause and effect, right?
That's where somebody like me comes in and streamlines stuff and make sure people don't beat each other up.
Do you get what I mean? So I think the big gap for most companies now that are going and then now there's this like rise of AI SDRs. There's a rise of AI tools that can supposedly personalize content or personalize emails. There's tools like Lavender out there that are supposed to write up emails for you, based on a few inputs here and there. So companies are finding ways, and because companies are finding ways, because there's a need, companies are finding ways to automate more of this outreach at scale. It's now creating a nice little kind of pool for startups to enter that space. Hey, we can use some certain inputs, we can use some data points to generate an email for you that you just press send and it goes out to your prospect. You don't even have to do any work. And you maybe
Mm,
start to find that companies are maybe starting to invest in this kind of AI tools that can generate emails out of nowhere. You have AI calling or AI dialer platforms like Nukes and Orem, for example, who are doing some really cool stuff around, AI powered dialing, trying to eliminate manual work for the AE so they can spend more time doing what they're paid to do. It's the same, all the same concept. Everyone's trying to make the AE's time better. Sorry, everyone's trying to make the AE's life better. Everyone's trying to make the AE's life more automated. And yeah, just creating platforms that can do as much of that manual admin work that the AEs do when it comes to prospecting or even deal management, trying to just eliminate as much manual work as possible and just automate as much as possible. So we've just talked about prospecting. We're not even touching the deal management stuff.
yeah, we ain't even got there yet. Why do you think it's harder to land meetings specifically?
The
I have thoughts,
prospects
but
calendar and email box has become noisier,
yeah.
much, much, much noisier. So it's much, much harder today to stand up from the noise, and it is not good enough anymore.
Mm,
You send an email that is not hyper personalized, that doesn't convey you understand their business, that doesn't incorporate a point of view, you're not
mm,
getting anywhere.
yeah.
Let's just won't respond to that stuff anymore because the market is noisy. Think about every kind of like SaaS industry or SaaS vertical you have out there. You have HR tech, you have revenue tech, you have logistics tech, you have health tech, you have all like just plethora of tech out there. And think about all of those companies have a go-to-market team that are all targeted to the same people. Think about how many emails a CTO gets every single day, prospecting emails the CTO gets. It's just noisy. And that's why you have some of them come in on LinkedIn and be like, I am not going to respond to you. And like they have a real goal, because they're just inundated with cold calls, they're inundated with emails that are just not
Mm.
relevant to the strategic objectives. It doesn't work anymore in 2025. If you want to get a C-suite's attention, you have to raise the bar, you have to raise the standard, and the quality of your outreach has to be just so much better. And you have to just do the work. You've got to do the homework. You can't get away with a generic outreach message, a generic customer story that it just doesn't work. Nothing generic works now.
So are we
That's
thinking more like how do we enable our sellers then? Are we thinking more up close and personal, going back to the good old days? I am doing quotation marks there for people who are only listening, of joining certain clubs and then, getting to know people long term, like the golf club and things like that.
in some markets, like, if you want to get a CFO's attention or, like, you need to be where they are because
Mm,
those folks are not out and about posting on LinkedIn every single day for you to engage with the content.
mm,
They're not there. You got to go find out the community. So yeah, there are certain personas where you have to go in their communities to figure out, to have a conversation, to understand what are the common problems that, for example, we're using the example of CFOs. What are the common problems that they face? What are the common challenges that they're facing right now? Is it cost efficiency? Whatever it is, you've got to go in these communities where those conversations are happening to understand their world a bit more because they won't respond to your email.
yeah, so what do you think that's going to do to pipelines? Because what's pinging in my head is that it feels like, or sales cycles rather. I feel like sales cycles are going to get longer.
Yes.
Obviously, things are industry dependent, but I feel like everything, if you're working on a standard 40-day, that's going to be more like 70, if not even longer. And if that does happen, we're going to have to start looking at sales very differently. We're going to have to start looking at KPIs differently.
Yeah,
And,
we're going to
you
start looking at
know,
budget setting differently and quota setting differently.
exactly onboarding and having that ramp up period, which then therefore means we're going to have to hire for a specific set of skills and not just, oh, you look like how I used to look like when I was 22, so I want
Oh
to give
yeah,
you a
100%.
chance.
100%. 100%. Where we are going is AEs, like when Salesforce um let go of like I don't know 2,000 people.
Mm,
This was recent. Let go of 2,000 people. They launched this big agent force thing, and like when you read the news about what's going on at Salesforce, it's like there's now a requirement for their AEs to be more technical. There is now a requirement for the solutions engineers to start being more go-to-market and start becoming sellers, right? So that is the direction where you're going to have this kind of well-rounded seller who traditionally just had sellers that would depend on a solution engineer to deliver the technical stuff, to deliver the value prop stuff, the demo stuff. Sellers now in 2025 moving forward will now be required to have some level of a technical conversation as well as good business acumen, as well as good sales acumen. They're going to need to become much well-rounded as sellers. They won't be able to maybe depend on expensive solution engineering resources, to come in and to fly in and do like their technical stuff. Do you know what I
mm.
mean? Because what's actually going to happen is most companies are realizing that engineers, solutions engineers are freaking expensive, right?
Yeah.
And so they can't hire a ton of them. And then when you do, if you do have solution engineer resources, you realize internally between AEs, you're battling for their resources, you're battling for their calendar, you're battling for their time, because you have maybe one sales engineer to 5 or 6 or 7
Go down.
AEs.
So,
Exactly. So you don't get that sales velocity that you want, right? You might be on a call and be like, oh, I can do this, Mr. Customer, I can do this call next week. We can do this kind of, technical fit next week. I'm going to pull my sales engineer. You can't do that anymore. That maybe be a 3 4 week thing because your solution engineer's calendar is completely backlogged because they're working with 7 different AEs who need we need a ton of stuff from them. So again, there's going to be more reliance, especially from the companies I've come from. There's definitely a lot more reliance on AEs to become more technically proficient, be able to talk to the product, be able to demo the product themselves, not need
yes.
pre-sales resources. So therefore, when you're going out to hire AEs from the market, you're going to need people that have good business acumen. They can talk. They have good executive language proficiency. Like they can talk to the C-suite very comfortably. They can talk to the technical stakeholders very comfortably. That is, if you really want to start doing more with less, that is where you got to start going.
And I would agree with that. And I think the thing that I'm worried about though is that sometimes we end up going too far in one direction and then too far in another.
Yeah.
So this idea of the AEs knowing a little bit about the actual product that they're selling is helpful. They should know because I've been in a situation before where I was sales opping for an organization and the sellers they kept saying, "Oh yeah, they know," but they couldn't get on the first sales call without having a subject matter expert in there. And I'm like, well, we don't rent you out by the day. Like, why are you here? You've been here for years. You don't know anything. We've given you all the documentation, marketing gave them everything, but they weren't comfortable having that conversation after years. So I completely understand why they should learn more about what it is that they're actually selling in order to go out there and do it. And also, it would help as well with the subject matter experts being a little bit more commercially minded so that they don't accidentally say the wrong thing. But what I'm worried about is, like I say, going too far in the opposite direction and we end up having a giant sales team that's a mixture of both, where no one's really good at anything. Because that's what tends to happen. We go from one direction to another direction based on whatever the fashion is at the moment, business wide. And then they end up hiring for generalists, and the generalists are never really generalists. They're either much better at sales in the commercial or much better at organizing stuff in the back end and retaining clients and upselling, and they don't do new business, or they're very, very into the tech and they know how to fix it, and they end up being that person that's in between lots of different other people in the business as well. And then people aren't paid appropriately.
Oh
Some
yeah.
people end up doing a lot more work than others, whilst others are just skating through in the shadow of everybody else. And
So
I'm concerned about that.
that's a valid concern. And that's maybe another thing worth investigating is our companies actually paying their people enough, right?
No, I can say that straight. At the very least in the UK, no.
Yeah.
When I was
I
18,
agree.
I was earning 18K as an operations coordinator. And I looked it up recently, 18K in today's money is 31K.
Wow.
Exactly. And I think the average salary across the country is 30 something.
33.
Right. Make that make sense. Because they don't. Which,
Yeah.
and we know how much it costs to live in the UK at the very least. And so we know the average should be a lot higher.
Mhm.
So There's an argument to say that some businesses are purposefully underpaying because they know that the government will end up having to supplement that person's wages through universal credit, particularly if they've got families,
Mhm.
because people do, should be allowed to live
Mhm.
and express themselves
I
as
totally
humans.
agree.
That doesn't even include holidays on that. It just means
Yeah,
paying the light bill on
yeah,
time.
yeah. It's tough.
But political rant. Um, looking at the future of sales again with AI, because I've seen something that a work friend of mine is building that is designed specifically, as you were saying, to talk about emails because it's designed around follow-ups. It's got all of this background details and data. Yeah, I'm going to mix the two words up, data, in there, and it can just pull in and just create these emails automatically.
Mm.
So let's say in a magical world where we don't go too far in one direction or the other. Let's say we've got AI that can pull in this background information and at least give you the email there, and maybe you have to check it before it goes out, right? What would a new salesperson's role look like? The person who actually has to close the sale, like run it through the sales cycle and close it, rather than the person who has to make appointments.
What would their role look like?
If they didn't have to write their own emails.
I think there'd definitely be a lot more onus on them to close deals because that's what they're paying for, right?
Yeah.
That's what the company's paying for is for you to close deals. Today there's not a lot of AEs out there that are KPI'd on um calls made, email sent, opportunities created. They don't get paid on that stuff. They get paid on closed one deal.
Yes,
So
they
there will
should
be
do
a
it.
lot more emphasis on that. And that's why companies might invest 30, 40 grand a year in a tool that can generate emails so that they can save X amount of time in productivity or X amount of time in, you know, whatever.
Mm.
That's just the way the world is going today. Now, of course, there's another conversation around, like what's a nice to have, what's a must have. Is a CFO going to sign off on a 40K spend on an email generating tool? Conversation for another day.
Yes.
But the role of an AE in the future with the rise of AI is going to be a lot more focused on value, selling
Yeah.
value. Sales cycles are going to get longer because the standard is going up for the customer. The customer is today is a lot more demanding. It's a lot more demanding of the tool, the product. It's a lot more demanding on the sales process for it to be absolutely excellent, right? That is something that customers care about is sales process excellence today. So there's going to be a lot more focus on the AEs to be top, absolutely top. Because then think about how many AEs they're competing with when they're in a competitive deal scenario, right? You're selling product A, but you've got product B, C, D, E, F in there, right? There are reps also driving those sales processes. So how do you stand out above all of them? The role of the AE is to focus on that rather
Mm.
than the noise of like prospecting or outbound at scale.
Tell me more about sales excellence, sales process excellence. I want to, because I know there's something that you're passionate about and
Mhm.
having that true, you know, A quality customer experience.
Yeah.
What does that look like to you? How have you seen it look?
Um, for me, the customer, if at the end of a sales process, a customer can look at you and actually, let me put it this way.
Mm.
It rarely happens. But if a customer, when you've closed the deal, can write an email to your boss and say, we wish we ran our sales process internally like the way your rep ran the sales process, best
Ooh.
compliment you can have. That is the standard. And I've had a couple of that in my career, right? Where, when I was selling revenue tech, when I was selling Clary, we typically sold to CROs, CEOs, like those were usually the folks that signed off on the deal, signed the DocuSign, whatever.
Mm.
And I remember a CEO wrote an email to my boss and said something around like, this is the model sales process. Like this is how I want my reps running their sales process internally, our company. I've had colleagues of mine who have been invited to sales kickoffs to talk about how they did the deal with that company, how
Mm.
did a particular part of the deal, whether it be managing multiple stakeholders, whether it be champion building. Like I've had colleagues that have been invited to sales kickoffs. Like that is the biggest commendation for a salesperson to be invited to your customer sales kickoff to teach your customers reps how to sell. That is when you know you smashed it, right? And that's the standard you should be aiming for. That's what, for me, that's what good looks like.
So give our listeners and watchers some tips then. So what are the key things that make how you run sales feel so good to the buyer?
I think when the buyer feels like you are listening to them all the way through the sales process, right from the beginning, right from discovery, right from discovery. Um, I could even extend it to say right from the first initial email they get from a BDR, SDR, or an AE or wherever,
Mm.
right? That that email is going out there and the customer can read it and feel like, man, this person understands my business. Man, this person understands the most common challenges that me and my peers are facing. Then you land that first meeting. Then you run that first meeting, validating a point of view. So you have done the work and you have taken the time to understand that customer, to understand the person, first of all, you're selling to have a point of view on the persona, but to also have a point of view on the business, right? And to put all of that together and say, hey, Mr. Customer, these are like validated for me. These are like the top three, top five things your business is focusing on to drive growth. Validate it for me. This is then how, these are then the key things or the key challenges that are going to stop you from achieving the strategic objectives. Validate that for me. This is how we have helped similar customers to solve this problem. And these are the stories. And this is where we can take you. We can take you from current state to future state. And this is how we're going to do it.
Mm. So we're
That
talking about those human connection skills, which we've heard
correct.
all this time,
Correct. No one's
but
going to invest
yeah,
a hundred grand, Charlene, into your software. Why are they going to put their neck on the line? Not they're putting the money on the line, they're putting their career on the line. Why are they
yeah,
going to do that? They're
reputation.
going to show up with like a really strong POV. Um, so that's what for me, the beginning
Mm.
of one like a really excellent customer experience sounds like. Then it's all about the touch points. It's all about the touch point. It's how do you ask for next steps? How do you take the customer from point A to point B? How do you take them from discovery to evaluation to whatever the next step in your sales stage is? And how do you make sure that that process is easy for them so that they can sell because they're selling internally. As much as you're selling to them, they're
Yes.
also selling internally. They're
Thank you
selling.
for saying it.
Do you know what I mean? So how do
Yes.
you make it easy for them? How, first of all, how do you get them the content that they need in a timely manner, in a professional manner, in a consolidated manner, in a way that you can collaborate on it? How do you create mutual action plans? How do you involve your internal stakeholders, your executives, your customer success teams, your professional services teams, your product teams to help and empower your champion to sell internally all the time? And that for me is where you start to separate the wheat from the chaff, right? The good from the average, the excellent from the, the A stars or A pluses from the Bs. Is the reps that are really truly exceptional are the folks that can take a customer through the sales stages and not even make the customer feel like they're being sold to,
Yeah,
but
because you're with
everything
them. That's the whole
correct.
point, right? You're working
Exactly.
with them to get
You're
to their end goal.
Exactly. Like you're collaboratively building a business case with them. You're collaboratively, bringing on their internal stakeholders, and you're doing a great job. Every touch point, every meeting that you have with an internal stakeholder on your customer side, it's a value add to them. You're telling, this is how I understand you. I understand your problem. This is how I'm trying to solve your problem, and you're doing that all the way through the sales cycle. You're
Yeah.
building your champion up so that when they enter into the office of the CFO and they're like, Mr. CFO, like, can we buy this? These are the reasons why we need this. These are the reasons why we need to buy it. This is the ROI. How do you make that conversation for that person as frictionless as possible? Because they have the content that they need, they have the information that they need, and they have the confidence that
Mm.
they need in your software, but also in your team. Because the software is one thing, the people implementing the software is another thing. The people then doing the post-sales process is another thing. How do they have confidence in your executives? Like this, you've got to just bring, and the best salespeople are so good at bringing all these internal stakeholders together to give the customer confidence that the customer is like making the right decision, but also empowering them so that when they go and actually get what we all want, which is budget to sign up, budget to pay for this thing, it's completely frictionless. The CFO is not interrogating the whole thing and tearing the whole thing apart. And you know, your champion walks out of that meeting with a tail in between their legs. That's not what you want,
No.
right? So for me, that is what a really strong customer experience looks like. It's all about like surfacing the content in the right way at the right time in different stages of the sales cycle, collaboratively working with your champion, listening. You're constantly doing discovery. You're constantly trying to understand what are the risks, what are the blockers. How do I then, your job as an AE is to remove those blockers. That's your job. Is you're
Yeah.
constantly removing blockers. You're constantly mitigating risk out of the process, out of the deals. You're removing bottlenecks. You're not taking 5 days to respond to your customer on a simple question. Do you get what I mean? Like we're talking about things like speed to lead, but there's also speed to bloody customer,
Treat them with
right?
respect. Do you know what everything that you're saying is reminding me of? And yes, it would. I'm biased. Being a really good project manager.
Yes, because that's what we are.
That's what we are.
There we are.
Being a really good project manager because it was drilled into me when I was first doing my studies in it, however long ago, that, the number one reason why projects fail is because of communication or lack thereof or improper communication. And one of the main things in project management, again, is making sure you don't have those blockers because we're moving this train and it's going to have to move. So we're making sure we're building, we're making sure we get stuff out the way so they can carry on going. But then you're also having to deal with the naysayers. There's going to be people that really want it, but what are their reasons for wanting it? There's going to be the busybodies that are trying to get involved when they don't have no reason to be getting involved. And there's people who you need to engage who are staying silent. And so much of project management is about communicating with all of those different kinds of stakeholders,
Basically, that is your job as an AE.
you know?
70% of it is keeping the train going. So it's making sure that communication is happening in the right way at the right time through the right channels, because you
Mm,
can't communicate to everyone on the customer side in the same way, right? So you got to
yeah.
figure out what way some people prefer email, some people prefer text, some people prefer, don't know, Facebook Messenger. I don't know. You got to figure
Put them
that
in
out.
a language they understand.
Exactly. So that is the AE job today is got a bit more complex because human beings are complex, right?
Yeah.
That's the nature of it. And the good ones are going to invest in the education on how they communicate with internal stakeholders, with how they communicate to executives. And I think the biggest like skill gap for just generally AEs across the country is how to talk, like how to communicate to executives. Sorry, that is one of the biggest skill gaps. Most AEs today, I'd say, I'll be bold, I'll say 80% of AEs today in the UK cannot sit in a room with a C-suite and hold their own.
That I mean, I'm on the other side of this because I'm a reverend, so I've never really had that trouble. Like status doesn't scare me. But I do understand you
About
can get in
status,
there and maybe like mumble over your words or
I
something
don't
like
think you
that.
can. I don't think you get away with it.
Oh,
I don't think you can wing talking to an executive anymore. So they're
yeah,
so time poor. They are
yeah,
so time poor. I've been in scenarios where a CRO will come into a meeting for 10 minutes and man, you better make that 10 minutes worth it,
yes, yes. I
right?
see what you.
And they are out, right? A CFO might come into a meeting for 5 minutes. You better make that 5 minutes worth it. And they are out, right? So do you know how to communicate to an executive? Do you know what they care about? And can you speak to that confidently and how your solution can deliver on what they care about the most? That's why I say maybe 80% of reps can't do it.
So we're going back into making sure that we really strengthen our what was used to be referred to as soft skills.
Correct. Yeah,
We
absolutely.
need to
Just how you
learn that
present.
communication.
Do you know this whole concept of executive presence,
Yes.
right? How many reps do you think have it?
Yes, and also, and I'm aware of the time, so we'll round up soon. But like also authenticity has to play a part as well
It does.
because executive presence doesn't just feel like one way, but when people go to learn it, it's just like it has to look like this. It has to be in a starched, apparel and whatsoever and
Yeah. It's not
and
wearing a
what's
suit. It's not about wearing a suit. It's
yeah.
what you say and how you say it.
Yes.
It's what you say and how you say it and doesn't make sense. It's not meant to be overcomplicated. It's about what you say, how you say it, the tone you say it, the confidence that you convey and you transmit, and the energy that you transmit when you say it.
Yeah. Are you
That's
prepared? Do you understand the words that's coming out of your mouth? Or are you just
correct.
talking?
Like the most important thing, Charlene, that executives want to see is, do you understand their business? It's not hard.
Because they don't
Do
want
you
to have to explain it to you. They're busy and they're tired.
exactly.
They're
Imagine,
stressed
imagine,
out.
imagine turning up. Imagine an executive turning up to a meeting and a rep says, "So, Michael, tell me about your business." Oh my God.
No, I don't want to tell you about my
The
business. what that's for. We pay money for it.
The cringiest question you can ask an executive is, tell me about your business, or how is your business, or tell me like stuff that you can literally get online if you do a bit of work, or you can get from other colleagues of that executive if you do a bit of work. But today, reps are turning up and asking a finance director or a managing director or a CEO, tell me about you. I personally, I'd rather just cancel the meeting if I don't know it.
I'm already know. And so therefore, a piece of advice I'd give to that, because it's also something that I prefer myself, and in fact, it's a question that I asked you when we last spoke, is be specific with your questions. And I don't just mean, look on ChatGPT and say, this is a general question. What's a specific question? What do you actually want to know, man? Like, be really specific. Because actually, I don't think a lot of people are used to specific questions
Mhm.
that are obviously on topic. Because like, and the example that I'll give from when we last spoke is when we were just getting to know each other, and you know, you asked me to basically talk about myself, and I'm just like, can you like, what do you want to know? I think I literally said, I'm just like, what specific question do you want to know? And I don't know if we started with food or not. I can't remember.
We start the
Or
food, yeah.
that's, my for my neurodivergent brain, I do ask people to be more specific, because it's like, well, how long is a piece of string? I don't know where to start. I don't know what you're going to find interesting. You don't know who you're speaking to when when you are in these meetings, but at the very least, they're going to be busy. So if you can give them a specific question that you know that they can answer, which in that question shows you've done your research, that saved you 4.5 minutes right there. And now they're taking you seriously.
Mhm.
Isn't that a better place to start?
Much better. Credibility. You just get you get a credibility point right there and then.
There you go. Michael, thank you so much. We've run over time a little bit.
We have that did not even feel like 45 minutes. Oh my God.
No, it wasn't the full 45, but it was, well, maybe it's nearly 40. But anyway, thank you so much.
Welcome. That was a
I
pleasure.
love
That was fun.
this.
Good. I'm
Yes.
glad you enjoyed it. We said we were gonna have fun, so we did.
I know. And like, hopefully we can do it again at some point in the future. I feel like we're always going to have something to talk about at least once a quarter.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh gosh, so thank you so much. Folks listening to this and watching this, thank you. Let us know what you think about it. There will be a link to go and track down Michael in the show notes. And there's going to be some links from me as well, because I've got a few stuff coming up. So do go and check that out, and make sure you rate this and like it wherever you're listening to this or watching this, because it's always
Amazing.
appreciated. So thank you so much. And we'll be growing some more next week. See
Yeah,
you
that's
then.
right.
All right.